Welcome to OJ Studios. Please enjoy this week's chapter of Bethany by Olivia Julius. Nathan walked into the school wearing his uniform. Everyone looked and watched him as he walked down the hallways. He wished that everyone would leave him alone, but instead they all stared like he was some freak in the freak show. Once he got to the commons, everyone gathered around and pointed at him while laughing. Nathan looked down and saw his uniform jumper wasn't covering his lower half anymore, and now everyone could see his panties. The laughing got louder, and Nathan just wanted to leave and run away, but he was stuck having to take the abuse. Tyler came up from the crowd with his minions in tow. He smiled and whispered, "Now you won't tattletale, will you?" Nathan woke up in a cold sweat. He looked around his dark room, still trying to relax from the parts of the dream. He looked at the alarm clock as it said 5:45 a.m. He went ahead and got up and flipped on his light. His school uniform was hung on the closet door. The only thing that hung was the top half of the uniform. His mother decided it was best that he choose what he wanted to wear, the uniform jumper, or a pair of girls' slacks. Nathan didn't know what to choose. Most girls his age was wearing jumpers because of how warm it was now. A few tomboys kept slacks on without caring about the coolness of the spring. Nathan wasn't sure about which type of girl he was going to be, but he knew for sure that school was going to be hard today, and he knew what he wore was going to tell the whole school about who she was. He wore only a white undershirt and a pair of pink striped panties. He didn't even bother to put on any of the girly pajamas, since back when he was a boy, he didn't even worry about them. His mother told him that he needed to so that he could get used to being a girl. But Nathan liked having a place where he could wear what he wanted and how he wanted. He knew that he was only limited to the clothes he had in his room, but he didn't care. After a quick shower, he left the bathroom only to be stopped by his mother. "Bethany may read, what on earth are you doing?" she said, yelling. His heart stopped a little as he thought about what he was doing wrong. Rebecca could tell that Nathan had no clue what she was referring to, so she rolled her eyes and pointed to his towel. "Bethany, remember, ladies don't wear their towels around their waist, they wear them around their chest," she said. Nathan quickly went back into the restroom and fixed the towel over his chest. To Nathan, he didn't feel weird. He was used to showing off the upper part of his body when he was a boy. He was encouraged to so that he wouldn't end up with a farmer's tan. Being a girl was way more different than he had imagined. With the towel corrected, he walked out again and went to his room, where he continued to look over his uniform. He hadn't worn the uniform jumper yet. He could have opted for the slacks, but if he was to live his life as a girl from now on, he wanted to prove that he wasn't scared of being a girl to others. He first carefully put on the navy blue tights that his mother taught him to put on the night before. He liked the feeling of the tights being on his legs, and he admits that even if he put on slacks instead, he would wear the tights also. The skirt of the jumper felt more open than the skirt that he had worn the other day. The pleats of it let in more air, and he could feel it rising a little if he walked fast. He was a little worried by this, and he hoped that he would be able to keep it under control. Nathan walked out of his room and down the hall to the kitchen, where he sat on a bar stool at the island and properly smoothed his skirt out. He was amazed at how long it was. The hem of the skirt went below his knees. It was going to be a walk in the park for him now compared to the mini skirt. Nathan looked at the girl's wallet his mother had given him the night before. It was long, flat, and dressed in colorful designs only a girl his age would love. He grabbed his wallet and started the grim task of switching his stuff to the newer wallet. He stopped on his school ID. He never really took the chance to see a picture of himself before. He didn't really like his photo taken when he was a boy, even though his mother always seemed to have a camera on his face. He looked at his short hair and missed it. Not just because it was a foot shorter than his hair now, but because it was easier to maintain it. He swiped his fingers through his long hair, and almost wished that it was back to that length again. He was almost sad to see the boy in the picture. He quietly slipped the ID into the wallet and closed it. Rebecca came into the kitchen holding her paperwork that she had been working off and on as Nathan was in the hospital. Today was going to be her first day back since the accident, and she had a lot of work to be done running her late father's newspaper. The newspaper The Shelby Times was once the biggest newspaper in the area, with 5 full-time reporters, 2 photographers and an editor. Of course, that was back when her father ran the company. Now they survived with only a fourth of what they had thanks to the internet and social media. "You look pretty," she said, looking Nathan up and down. She wasn't sure that it was a good idea for Nathan to go in a jumper, especially after yesterday's events with Ben, but she decided to let Nathan figure that out for himself. Alex came at his usual time and Nathan jumped up, kissed his mother, and ran to the door smiling all the way. He had hoped that Alex would come by again even after yesterday's events. With one strap of his book bag over his shoulder, Nathan and Alex both walked to school side by side. The Advanced Learning Center is a small one-story school in the center of town. It contained 2 large wings, one for the elementary school and one for the middle school/high school. Around it was a huge field and a playground for the elementary kids to play on, and for the high school and middle school students to run around during their mandatory run before school started. One building did sit in the very back of the schoolyard, and every student of the Advanced Learning Center knew that if he or she had to go in there, that they were in big trouble. Gone is where Nathan found himself standing in front of its huge blue door. Above the door, huge words were carved into it, saying Advanced Learning Center Administrative Office. Established in 1932. Before, Nathan had only needed to be in that building once a year for the annual registration event held at the first of the year. He didn't want to go in there, but the security guard at the front doors of the school told him that his ID was no longer valid and that he would need to see Mrs. Quinton before he was allowed to enter the building. He pressed the mic button by the door and heard the doors click open. He slowly walked into the foyer, where a plump woman was sitting, half eating a pudding cup and half typing on a small smartphone. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, looking down at Nathan, obviously mad that he had interrupted her. "I'm here to see Mrs. Quinton," he said softly. The lady rolled her eyes and turned to her computer screen. "Name?" she said rudely. "Nanth," he began to say, but then stopped himself. "Bethany Reed." The lady pointed at a group of mismatched chairs on the other side of the room, but didn't say anything. Nathan took the hint and found a seat. He crossed his legs and wondered what was going to happen next. He sat there patiently for 5 minutes, wondering what was going on. He heard the door close behind him and he looked back to see Mrs. Quinton walking in with 2 girls in tow. He recognized the 2 from his class. They were Amy and Brittany. At one time Nathan had a crush on Brittany last year, but quickly lost interest when he and Alex swore off girls forever. Amy he really didn't know too well. Just that she was new to the school this year, and her parents were the new owners of a new country living resort about 10 minutes away. Mrs. Quinton walked up to the lady, and with the same enthusiasm the lady pointed in Nathan's direction, and the 3 other girls turned and stared at Nathan with blank faces. Miss Quinton said something to the other girls, and they disappeared into a room behind the lady. Nathan had never gone back there before and always wondered what was behind those doors. Mrs. Quinton walked over to Nathan with the huge smile that she always gave her students. Nathan stood and smoothed out his skirt. "You must be Bethany," she said, holding out her hand for Nathan to shake. Nathan shook her hand but did not say anything. Mrs. Quinton complimented him on his appearance before taking him by the hand and guiding him to the doorway. Inside, Nathan's hopes were dashed when he just saw a small hallway with 2 doors on each side. They both walked down the hall while Nathan quickly read the signs by the doors. Detention, storage, and a testing area were along the route. Mrs. Quinton ushered Nathan into the last door on the left, marked her office. The girls from before sat in the chairs across from her desk, and they quickly stood once they saw him walk in. Nathan walked in and stood by the door and waited as Mrs. Quinton made it to her desk. "Miss Bethany, I'm glad to see you back in our school," she said, motioning us to sit down. All 3 of us sat down in our seats. "Ladies, I'm not going to lie to you, this will be a very hard first couple of weeks. For Bethany, this might be the worst week of school that she's faced yet. Amy and Brittany, your job will be to help Bethany out if she needs it. You will help guide her in what she needs to know, help protect her from bullying, and above all be a friend to her." The 2 girls on either side of Nathan nodded in unison, while Nathan wondered what would happen to him this week. Nathan walked with both girls on either side of him. They both talked to each other about boys' makeup in the dance class they were both in. They occasionally asked Nathan for his opinion, but he declined to reply. "You know what? You should be in our class," Amy said cheerfully as they walked. Nathan shrugged. He didn't know anything about dancing, and he was afraid to fail in front of the class, but he did promise both girls that he would think about it. Nathan swiped his new ID with his new name through the scanner and the guard let him in without a second thought. Nathan stepped into the packed hallways of the elementary wing, and everyone stopped and stared at the three girls that were walking down the hall. All the students knew about Nathan, and they all wanted a good glimpse of the new girl. Nathan felt uneasy about the group of students that were just standing there. Some were whispering to each other while others straight out called him a fag. Teachers tried to hush the students, but they themselves were shocked at what they were seeing. The girl led Nathan to his new locker in the girls' locker area. Nathan quickly deposited his books that he wouldn't need for that day and silently closed the locker. Brittany and Amy were at their locker grabbing items out of them. Mostly the hallway went back to normal, but occasionally someone would stop and stare at him like he was a freak at a freak show. Once Nathan got to his classroom, everyone in his class was already in their seats and looking towards the doorway hoping to get another glance at him. Mrs. White wasn't in the room yet, so Nathan had to guess where to sit on the girls' side of the room. "Good thing that freak knows where to sit!" one boy yelled out. The other boys started laughing while most of the girls told them to shut up. Nathan sunk even lower in his seat wanting to hide. Amy and Brittany sat next to him and tried to calm their new friend. "They're just boys," Brittany said while patting Nathan's hand. Nathan took his arm away from Brittany and sighed a little. He knew this was going to be hard, but he had no idea it would be this hard. "That's enough," Mrs. White said, yelling at the top of her lungs. All the students looked up to find Mrs. White slowly walking to her desk. They called her Old White because she taught most of the students in the school's parents. She was about for retirement and looked at it every day at work. "Bethany, come here to the front," she said, standing next to her desk. Nathan looked around at his classmates and then stood up slowly. She walked to the front and stood in front of the class right next to Mrs. White. "Class, this is Bethany Reed. Bethany is a girl now, so I want you all to treat her with the respect that she deserves. We all know who Nathan was, and this doesn't mean that Nathan is gone, it just means he is now a girl." Mrs. White pointed at Brittany, who stood up and walked to Nathan's side. "Brittany and Amy will be helping Bethany out for the next few weeks. They both have been personally asked by me to assist Mrs. Bethany any ways she might need it." Nathan went bright red because of all the people that were looking at him. Mrs. White told them both to sit down, and Nathan quickly went to his new desk, thankful that to be over. Mrs. White started her lesson of the day, and he could feel eyes start to drift away from him into the blackboard. Recess was a fun time for Nathan. He always played football with his friends on the large field, but he knew that Ben was there, and that Ben would never allow Nathan to play with them again. Plus, he couldn't anyway. He could only imagine the difficulties he would have in the jumper if he tried to play. "What are you doing?" Alex asked, catching Nathan off guard. "Shouldn't you be playing with your friends?" Nathan asked, pointing to the group of boys that were getting ready to play. "Nah, it's no fun without you," Nathan said, sitting on the bench next to Nathan. "Besides, you need me since you're a girl now." Nathan looked around questionably. "Why do you?" he asked. Nathan looked around the playground and then whispered. "Because you're a cute girl." Nathan looked at him oddly and he laughed a little. Nathan didn't want to be known as a cute girl, he just wanted to be one of the guys. Well, look who it is, it's little Miss Dress Stealer and Mr. Weirdo," someone said behind Nathan. They both looked up and saw Victoria and her two friends standing behind her. "What do you want, Victoria?" Alex asked, not really wanting her there. "Your girlfriend stole my dress and I want it back," she said. "She stole it from me from Hannah's closet." "Mom bought it for me," Nathan said, deafening himself. "Well, my dad was going to," she said, putting her hand on her hips. "If I would have known that you were the freak everyone was talking about, I would have had it put behind the counter so you wouldn't have grabbed it." "Sorry, I had to find a dress for Alex's party," Nathan quickly said. "Yeah, we'll see about that," Victoria said before turning around and leaving. "What was that all about?" Alex asked. Nathan shrugged a little, happy that he got one over on Victoria. It's a long story, I'll tell you later. Once inside, Mrs. White looked around at her students. She had had an idea brewing in her head ever since she heard of Nathan's condition, and now, she was ready to release it. Class, your homework tonight is partly because of Bethany. Nathan looked stunned as all the students looked at him with anger. Tonight, I want you all to imagine what it would be like if you all woke up in another body. What if you woke up the opposite gender? What would you do? What's your name? Would you be brave like Bethany and wear the jumper dress on your first day back even though you know that you'll be picked on? I want you to think wisely and honestly about this project. This is due on Monday. She turned away from the class and started writing on the board. Nathan looked over at Alex, who was also looking at him.